Okay. All right. So Ameera is a leading figure in Nigeria's beauty and wellness industry. She's the founder of a nail bar, a luxury nail spa, and Amali Cosmetics, Nigeria's first clean beauty nail brand. With over 13 years of experience, she's a certified beauty therapist, medical esthetician, and educator, sharing her expertise through the Full Set online course. She serves as an executive chair and director of communications at the Spa and Wellness Association of Africa and is a technical committee member at the Standards Organization of Nigeria, advocating for industry quality and safety. Ameera is also a passionate advocate for women and children's rights, committed to education, empowerment, and raising industry standards. Hi, Ameera. Come up on stage. Sorry.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Good afternoon, everyone.
So we know who Ameera is. You're running the nail bar for 14 years, which is a huge milestone. We don't see a lot of businesses, period, and then beauty businesses that actually have that type of longevity. What was the original vision when you opened up your doors? Talk to us about that.
So for me, it was really, first of all, thank you for that. Yes, 14 years in a terrain like Nigeria is very, very difficult. And I'm sure all of us here that are beauty entrepreneurs or are involved in the industry in one way or the other know how difficult it is to navigate on a daily basis. So the nail bar pretty much was born as a result of my experience with grief. And, in having spa treatments, nail treatments, things like that, I found that, it was almost like a coping mechanism for the grief. And because I was getting relief, I was like, oh, how do I share this experience with everybody else, right? So that was the starting point, I would say. It was more from a place of, oh, I'm getting a sense of peace of mind, right? Maybe then I was much younger. I didn't really understand daily stresses of life, but just from that angle of grief, I felt like it was something worth sharing with everybody else. And then I also think that, when I started the nail bar, there wasn't a nail spa in Abuja. I had, first master's entry advantage, as we discussed over the weekend. And the goal for me really was to, I guess, educate as well as share what I found to be something that was missing in the industry at the time. Since then, first of all, my training was in aesthetics, not necessarily the manicures and the pedicures. So my concept was, how do I make manicures and pedicures like facials, if that makes sense? So the pedicures and manicures were always customized to suit people's, varying skin conditions, as opposed to other spas that I had visited here in Abuja at the time, not that many. I think it was Be Natural and Spring Spa at the time, and maybe Lifestyle. There were three other places. And I just wanted to do things differently. And I think I've been doing that for the last 14 years. I've managed to stick to, thinking outside the box.
That's amazing. 14 years.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So I'm sure it's not always been easy, building, growing a business, expanding, and even staying consistent with delivering excellence. Right. So what were some of the top three challenges that you faced when you're growing a business, and how did you navigate them?
Okay, so I'll just summarize. I'll list out the top three and then sort of break it down. So the first one for me was, the consumers, right? So at the time I was trying to do something somewhat different, and a lot of people didn't really understand it or appreciate it. So there was a lot of educating the customer on what makes us different. So that was number one. Number two was staffing. And I think this remains a long-term issue for most businesses. Again, at the time I started, there were people who had, I would say they knew the handwork, right? But they didn't know the science behind things. They didn't know the why behind things. And there were no standards or structure around the way that the work was being done. So today we have beauty schools that actively train people and they go through that. So you have a better informed pool of people that you can employ. But back then that wasn't the case. I also find that now, despite the fact that there are beauty schools and people, going in to get the training is quite expensive. So if you're able to actually afford the training, chances are you're looking to work for yourself, right? So people like me who are also looking to still employ, you don't necessarily still get people that have gone through that training. So that remains a challenge, right? And I think lastly is also just, the ability to scale as a business. A lot of people will ask, it's been 14 years, why do you only have the one branch? Right? And this is a very honest response for me. I find that, I'm not willing to spread myself thin in terms of people management across multiple locations. That's not something that I find has worked for me, as well as, say, expanding into manufacturing, for instance, with Amali Cosmetics, or expanding into education with the full set. I found that, expansion can come in other ways, not necessarily, a brick and mortar style. And what informed that decision for me was simply just the people management side of things. And I think when you reached out about Splice and Halima and I discussed Splice, it was one of the exciting things for me because I also see it as a management tool should I proceed to have multiple locations. So yeah, well done to you on that.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So staffing is it's difficult, right? I don't even think it's something that's unique to just the beauty industry. I have staffing challenges as well. But then when you think about your 14-year journey, have there been any moments where you're like, ugh, okay, I'm tired. I'm done. I've tried. It's okay. I can come and kill myself. Right.
And go and die. Yeah, so over 14 years, honestly, I feel like I've been quite lucky to have staff that have stayed with me for, prolonged periods of time. I have some staff that have been with me for 10 years, 12 years, 6 years. But there's also another side to that, right? The issues I face still remain in that staffing area. And also Nigeria, and Nigeria happening every day. So I'm pretty sure in the first 3 months of starting Nail Bar, I had already said to my mom, I'm done. I've done my best. I'm not doing this anymore. And I guess for her, it was like, my dear, I just put a lot of money in this, so you better make it work. But I find that, it's difficult when you're coming from a place with structure and standards, and also, being mentally wired for structure and standards, to then be in a place where it's almost like anything goes. So I've really struggled with, the irregularities in the policies here. You can have something, you feel like, oh, I finally just figured this out. And you wake up and on the news, they've changed something that just takes you back to square one, sometimes even to ground zero, where you're having to start again. So I find that, a sense of community, again, Halima, sorry, don't get tired of hearing your name. But she's one of my closest friends, and I'm so thrilled that we're in the same industry. The point I'm making here is that having someone that you can share ideas with keeps you going. Having someone that sort of encourages you when things are not quite right keeps you going. Also, Rukaya of Raw Beauty, she has the Beauty Circle, which is an online platform. Again, you're connecting people in a very similar industry, maybe different factions of it, but it's nice to know that there are people that are going through similar things, and you can sort of rub minds, and get some sort of clarity, some sort of solace. because sometimes it's like, why is it me? Why is this only happening to me? And then you share it and realize, oh, actually, these are issues across the board in the industry. And, there are a group of people you can work with to make this happen. And this matters because when I started, I felt very alone. I felt very, very alone. There was nobody I could sort of bounce things off. I was sort of navigating murky waters on my own. Even though there were spas and salons, most of them were owned by rich housewives. They weren't really educated in the field. It's like, oh, my darling husband, you have this extra cash. I want a pink and brown themed salon. That's it. So there were no mentors. There was nobody. I had to sort of navigate it on my own. And I think that was one of the things that also inspired my wanting to write the full set for my 10th year anniversary, because I just felt like, okay, this industry is coming up. What do I have to share with others that won't make them feel as alone as I felt when I started?
That's so powerful, and I love that you shared that, because I think for a lot of us, we are solo founders. If you're lucky, you might have a partner in your business, but most times it's just you figuring things out. And being a solo founder is super hard. And I think as Nigerians, we don't know how to ask for help, or it's kind of like seen as a sign of weakness, like when you ask for help. So like, how have you been able to, I guess, curate your community where you have Halima and other people who you can turn to and ask for help? And how, like, for somebody who is new trying to start up in the industry, what would you say to them, like with asking for help or just like getting the help that they need?
So it's important that you also, you're selective about where you're seeking for help from. It's sounding now like, oh, ask for help, community. Some people are not wired that way, and you could get your fingers burnt when you reach out to the wrong people. So when I started out, again, I was doing, first of all, my education was abroad. A lot of things that I read were from industries that were a lot more advanced. So it took a lot of mental work for me to take what I needed and transform it and make it relatable to this terrain. So I think one of the things that I found was that I was connecting with a lot of people, but they weren't in Nigeria, if that makes sense. So even now that I'm saying Halima, I believe she reached out and started the conversations around business because she was in makeup previously, right? And I was a bit apprehensive. You don't know this. This is the first time you're hearing this, but I was a little bit apprehensive because I just felt like I've tried to build community with, again, the old housewives that had, the businesses, and they all they weren't very pleasant. I had one key experience that I'd like to share. It was at the first SWA chapter event in Lagos at the Wheat Baker. I think this was in 2015. And, it was, I think, about 200 people. We curated this event and, brought in about 200 people. Probably one of the first spa industry type events. And one of the directors on the team, who I looked up to as, someone that I could learn from or even a mentor, in a room full of almost 200 people, literally went off at me. And this is just me talking like this, being myself, going about my business. And I guess maybe it just got to her, so much that she couldn't hold it back. So she went off. And the funny thing is, your mindset is important. Because I was still looking at it like, oh, growth, this person's ahead of me. I didn't even see what she did. It was when she walked off, somebody else came and said, oh, are you okay? Like, did you notice that, like, and then other people started tripping, like, oh, are you okay? But I was so oblivious because for me, it was just like, oh, this is happening for the industry, right? But the point I'm making is when you reach out, sometimes it feels like there's someone you can rely on. There's someone that you can grow from. You don't realize that people are dealing with their own insecurities as well, right? And sometimes there's a lot of projecting that may come your way. And it can just feel like am I in the right place? Am I ever going to have a true sense of community that allows the industry grow? So outside of even yourself, right? How do you make this industry, how do you establish it to a point where it's no longer at that low level of competition and it's more about collaboration? Don't know if that makes sense. Um, and I think the point I'm making is the mindset matters. So despite the fact that this lady did what she did, because in my mind I was still so focused on getting to a certain destination, it was easy to sort of push through. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. So speaking about mindset, when you're building a business and you're in business for 14 years, I'm going to keep saying 14 years. One of the things that you have to do is shift your mindset, because what got you to 1 year to 4 years, 7, 14, there it keeps changing. And one of those key things is, delegation. How have you navigated that, especially with, having context for staffing challenges?
So I'll share a story about what happened just before I turned one. At my first location, I think I closed a little later than usual. So maybe this is like 8:30, 9 p.m. And as I had gotten into my car and I just locked the door, I was literally surrounded by like 4 or 5 men. And thankfully, my reflex is just as soon as I get into the car, I lock the door. But basically, these men had surrounded me, punching the windows, the windshield. There was all sorts going on. And I froze, right? Because I was panicking. And one of my staff from a distance saw what was happening and was just screaming like, oh, drive, drive, drive. And they'll sort of fall away. Now that happened. And this is me who had been looking for a way out because everything. It's not funny, but it's funny, right? Because like I said, month 3, I was already feeling like, oh, this isn't meeting my expectations, right? How can I remove myself and go back to where I'm coming from? So when that attack happened, I just said to my mom, you know what, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. Let me just go and do a master's and carry on with my life. But at that time, I had my family around me. So she was like, this is what happens in Nigeria, unfortunately. You need to make a decision. Do you want to go back to a place where you're just a number, or do you want to stay and actually, fulfill this mission that you've been sharing with me over the years? So I think I took about 3 months off to sort of get myself together, because at that point I was suffering with like terrible insomnia. I had like PTSD from the whole experience. And I thought to myself, okay, if I'm really going to make this work, because at that point, right, you're not thinking, let me invest even more money into this place that's draining and sucking the life out of me. So what I ended up doing was then finding a place where I could control my own security, provide my own amenities, and just feel a little bit safer. So that was how I navigated the first year. And I found that, this experience was enough to shut everything down. And so that sort of became like my reference point. Like, okay, if it's not as bad as, the physical threat to violence and all of those things that you experienced in the first year, you can, if you overcame that, you can overcome this. And before I knew it was year 2, year 3, year 5, so a lot of resilience is involved, and passion and vision.
Okay, I'm sorry that happened to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, growth is exciting, right? But then it comes with growing pains, right? And then, with growing pains, there's the human element, there's the customer element, there's just technology and just life happening. Because something that I hear a lot from people is, and I also struggle with this myself, is delegation. Right? People are afraid to delegate because they think that it means they're losing control. How have you navigated that? Because 14 years, you can't do everything by yourself.
No, absolutely not. So again, on Saturday, I was saying how you're only as strong as your team, right? I think as a business, it's important to have like systems and structures in place that can be like a reference point for your staff, whether you're present or not. That being said, a lot of people don't really like to read. So you still have the issues of, oh, this is clearly stated out, but it's not being carried out. So despite delegating, I find that personally I've struggled with still having to handhold a little bit. Things have sort of eased off with technology. There's also like a consciousness with my staff because they know I'm watching like on my phone from the CCTV. So people are actively doing their jobs. It's not a case of, oh, when the cat's away, the mice, what is it? Yeah, the mice, yeah, come out to play. So there's that. But there's also, the issue of hiring the right people for the right positions, right? So I know that there are game changers in people's businesses when you hire, say, the right operations manager, all of a sudden things turn around. It's almost like Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares. You know how he comes in, there's a business that's flailing and failing. He comes in and makes a few changes. He speaks to the manager to see whether they have what it takes to actually stay on or if a new person needs to come in. So I find that hiring process is also very key in ensuring that delegation can work out. If you want to grow, you can't do it alone. You just said that. You need a team that understands your vision. They really, really want to succeed and see the business succeed as much as you do. They have to have like a strong sense of ownership in the way that you do. Otherwise, that delegation can lead to the failure of your business.
Yeah. So speaking about, vision and finding the right people who tap into that, what's been your approach to hiring people who align with your vision? There was someone in the Lagos event that we had, I think last month. Joycey said, she hires for alignment, I think, not for skill. So I want to get your take on not just that, but like in general, how have you approached just hiring the right people for your team?
So, in the past, I was very emotional about my hiring process. So I would meet someone that I like, and I feel like, oh, they tick certain boxes, but they don't tick the rest, but I can make it work because I have this skill set and I can pour into them and this and that. I got my fingers burnt so many times. I think at the start of this year, I made the decision, a rather difficult decision, to lean out my team. And I stuck with only, let's say if I had 15 team members, I'm down to maybe 7, right? This is just an example. So I didn't hesitate to lean it out because what I realized was that a lot of people were not aligned, right? So at the beginning, it looks like they say yes to, they give all the right answers at the interviewing stage. But what I've learned to do is to listen to what people are not saying rather than listening to what they're actually saying. Okay, so for instance, let me think of an example. Okay, so you come in this dress, right? And I know the weather says it's going to rain, right? And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is such a beautiful outfit. So stunning. It's funny that the sun is out now, but I'm not sure what it's going to be like later. Do you see what I mean? So if you're really listening, you're thinking, oh, she complimented my outfit. If you're not really listening, you're thinking, oh, she complimented my outfit. But if you're really listening, what you're hearing is, oh, this is a nice outfit, but is it suitable for the occasion, like the weather, or make sense? Yeah. So that's what I've learned to do in the hiring process. There are also a few agencies now that, understand the beauty industry a bit, whereas before there wasn't really room for it. So I've reduced the stress by basically having them present only the most befitting candidates, right? So there's no burnout in the selection process for me. And at the time that I'm interviewing at the final stage, I'm pretty clear on that. And I'm also big on character, right? So it's not just about the skill sets you possess or your qualifications. You can have all of those things. And if your character doesn't represent what my brand, I guess the ethos of my brand, exactly,
then that's not enough for me to actually take you on. So there's so many factors that are considered.
Okay. So let's talk about money for a second. Pricing is one of those very tricky things, especially in this industry.
Yeah.
And especially where people want luxury, but then they want discounts as well. How did you figure out the right pricing for your services and product?
So, I always struggled with the money conversation, even with my staff, right? So one of the things I had to do early on was to get an accountant, because naturally I'm a giver, right? You can come to me and be like, oh my God, I really love this nail polish or whatever. I'm like, oh, I have like 10, come just take one, right? Or you can come in for a treatment and I'm like, oh, I think it's 10,000, when in reality it's like 45. I'm not even conversant. And then the accountant will be like, no. So I've stopped having money conversations. I'm not so shy about it anymore. I'm very quick to point whoever is interested to the right person so they get the right figures, right? But I think what I struggled with was because of the fluctuating exchange rate. And a lot of the products that we use matter. You can't just use, for example, with pedicures, a lot of salons would use like, there's this popular soak. It's inexpensive. It doesn't really do anything. It just foams, right? Okay, I'm not sure of the name, but it just foams. It doesn't have any, enriching or enhancing properties to your pedicures. So, if you are fully, aware of the sort of products you need to use, a lot of companies don't manufacture that locally. So you have to export, right? Now we've seen a steady increase in the FX, even the cost of like customs duties and things like that. And where I used to sort of want to compete on price, I stopped doing that maybe 7, 8 years ago. It's the quality needs to speak for itself. It's also almost like a weeding process for the clientele. So if you're not aligned with what the brand offers and represents, then the price will help you remove yourself from it. Because, when the customers also don't align, you set yourself up for problems. So the pricing is what it is what I'm trying to say. You can't make it any less. You can't make it some people make it significantly more, but I think it's just in the value of your offerings, right? And there are some conversations Halim and I normally have. For instance, we offer certain chemical peels, and these peels are maybe, for a box of 6, maybe they're about $1,000 or something. And you see your American counterparts offering that peel for maybe $750. You can't offer that peel here at the same price, despite the fact that it costs you 3 times more to actually offer that very same service. So you have to take into consideration the terrain you're actually in and to see how the price actually works. Because the way I look at it is, okay, I don't have certain taxes and fees that they have to pay. So I can make a concession here, but it always has to be profitable, bottom line.
All right. I'm going to pause here for any questions from the audience.